Joining me now is the Democratic Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari of Arizona. She's a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform and has a personal connection to Iran. So I have to ask you, Congresswoman, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you feeling about where we are in this moment?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I would say I am very hesitantly relieved Tuesday morning when Donald Trump, of course, made the apocalyptic statement about a whole civilization will die tonight. I think nobody has ever seen anything quite like this coming from a U.S. president. I take what Donald Trump says very seriously because he has, in fact, followed through with many of his most egregious promises and statements. And so that was a very, very anxiety-inducing day. I think many of us were doing everything possible to sound the alarm and the urgency about him being mentally unstable and unfit for office. I mean, I believe that he should be removed from office because of that statement. So obviously relieved that while fragile, there is a ceasefire in place, that nothing absolutely horrific happened on Tuesday evening, and that a country of 90 million people didn't see bombs, falling over their heads. And who knows what he meant by that. Of course, right. To me, that language sounded like normalization of nuclear weapons use.
So there is a wide range of views in the Iranian diaspora in America, right? There are some people who would be very supportive of the replacement of the Islamic Republic regime, and we're actually supportive of some of the efforts by Donald Trump. But there's nobody, no matter where you are in the Iranian diaspora in America, there's nobody who thought the destruction of a civilization is something that should even be entertained for a moment.
Yeah, and I think even to your first point, I think the vast majority, if not all, of the Iranian diaspora want the Islamic Republic regime gone, including me. I mean, there would be nothing better than Iran free of that regime that is so repressive. It's about the tactics where there's disagreements and whether or not war is the mechanism to achieve that, which, I think the last, 40 days have demonstrated that this is a regime that is very entrenched in society in Iran. They're very powerful. They have been preparing for this day for 47 years. And what I have heard from people inside Iran and what we're seeing now with the executions restarting is that this war probably served to actually entrench the regime further. So I think it was very counterproductive in that manner. I think it served to, when you're bombing civilian infrastructure, when you're hitting schools, when you're hitting hospitals, when you are threatening a civilization that every Iranian is incredibly proud of, a long history of thousands of years, you're going to turn some people against you, and you're going to give the regime propaganda and a way to further entrench themselves. So I think even from that perspective, for all of us who want to see regime change in Iran, this ultimately ended up being worse off for Iranian people than before the war began.
What does success look like? I don't think it's going to be whatever we see with J.D. Vance and Witkoff and Kushner in Islamabad right now. Maybe they'll achieve some sort of temporary peace, which would be great. But what does what you're talking about actually look like, given how entrenched the Islamic Republic is, given the fact that Iran does have a history of wanting to embrace democracy? How do you actually fix Iran?
Well, you're asking the million-dollar question. But look, what I have been advocating for, I think that if the international community wants to be serious about helping Iranian people, there are many non-kinetic means to do so. Even in this Trump administration, from the outset of January of 2025, the Trump administration has cut funding for human rights organizations that have been doing work in Iran. There are bills in Congress right now, including one of my bills called the Iran Act, which is about internet freedom in Iran. As you know, the regime in Iran has cut off internet, shut it off for the 90 million population since the massacres began in January by the regime. We could be helping with that. We could be appropriating funds to help with direct-to-cell internet technology so Iranian people can get in line. And then any effort that has anything to do with promoting civil society, supporting Iranian people. It's got to be done in a multilateral basis. And then I'll just add, in terms of success as it pertains to the ceasefire, I absolutely think that Lebanon needs to be included. I am heartbroken for the Lebanese people who have seen over 1,800 people killed. The deadliest day of this war was actually on Wednesday, April 8th.
Yep.
More than 200 people were killed, and we cannot forget about them throughout any of this.
Congresswoman, thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time. The Democratic Congressman Yasamin Ansari of Arizona. All right, coming up, tomorrow's Election Day in Hungary.